Welcome to Mysterious Goings On, the podcast about creativity, writing, and mystery. Every week, we talk about all kinds of great fiction and meet the people who write it. We also feature explorations about creativity in all walks of life. Your host, Alex Greenwood, will join you right after this.
Hi, this is Cassandra Lane. I'm the author of We Are Bridges, a memoir. You're listening to Mysterious Goings On with Alex Greenwood.
"35 years ago, James Gilbert's book was named as a notable book of the year by the New York Times. That was for a book on history by this noted historian. Well, he's at it again, this time with a suspenseful thriller that reveals a murder mystery that will keep readers guessing and on the edge of their seats. Not nearly as auspicious, but pretty important to us is that James Gilbert appeared here on Mysterious Goings On last year to talk about his most recent work. And we are so excited to have him back here to discuss his new one, Murder at the Olympiad. James Gilbert, sir, welcome back to Mysterious Goings On.
Glad to be here.
How have you been? How has the world found you the past 6 or 7 months since we last spoke? Are you doing all right?
Oh, yes. Semi shut in, but other than that, just fine. It's great to be a writer because you are shut in.
Yeah. I always tell people, they say, "What's it like being a writer?" And I say, well, it's like always having homework. But the good news is, I guess, if you're stuck at home, you might as well do your homework. Oh man, Dr. Gilbert, it's so good to have you back here. And we had such fun talking about your last book, which was very Chicago centric. And now this book, Murder at the Olympiad, is the second in this series. You want to tell us a little bit about Murder at the Olympiad?
Sure. It's really based on my knowledge of Puerto Vallarta, which is a really nice resort in Mexico on the coast. And I've been going there for years. And it's a very strange city, and I try to bring that out in the book. It's got three very distinct parts. One is the high-rise American place where it's like a big gated community with high-rise hotels and fancy swimming pools and fancy restaurants. And then there's an old city with cobblestone streets, and it's the original city. And then there's this place called Zona Romantica, which is you can imagine from the name, the romantic zone. And it's got everything. It's got American expats, it's got nightclubs, it's got massage parlors, it's kind of a gay area. And so it's a great city to write about, because you can travel from one environment to another and meet very different kinds of people, and they're all parts of this novel. I got the idea for it because I was walking one day in the Zona Romantica, which is where I tend to stay, because the other two are really boring. Who wants to be in a high rise?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I was walking down the street and came to this open door, and it was kind of gloomy, and I could see a staircase inside. And I looked up, and there's a gay flag on the top, and I thought, oh, this has got to be some kind of a gay establishment. And so I went back to my hotel and looked on my cell phone and found that it was a gay sauna. And so I thought to myself, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be great to have a murder there and uncover the kind of underground of Puerto Vallarta and really see what that world is like. So that was the inspiration to write this book. The second thing is that it's the second in a series, and it has the same detective, although she's not intentionally a detective. She's the American consul for the city of Puerto Vallarta. So anything that goes wrong with an American, and you can imagine all the stuff that goes wrong. You lose your passport, you lose your credit cards, you get swindled, you get robbed, you try to open a business and you confront the Mexican bureaucracy. So she's a kind of a jack of all trades. So anytime anybody gets into trouble, she has to deal with it. So when this murder occurs, she has to deal with the parents, she has to deal with the police, she has to deal with the morgue, she has to deal with the American ambassador, and she eventually ends up trying to solve the crime. And she does.
Well, and that's what she did in the first book, which was Zona Romantica. And so Amanda Pennyworth, American consul, as you say, in this beautiful resort town, kind of you got kind of, forgive me and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's kind of a Casablanca and Mexico angle here. Is there not a little bit? In the sense of how it is, you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's that kind of a place.
Yeah, and I see, I love that stuff, and that's one of the things I think you're so adept at with your work, is creating this world. I mean, you're obviously finding inspiration, as you just described, in a real place, and someplace you strolled past, and then your imagination caught fire. But you've also created this world, this Amanda Pennyworth world. And now that the first book came out in 2020, I believe, and
yes,
did rather well and has very nice reviews. And of course, we had you on talking about something that was not part of this series last time, talking about Tales of Little Egypt, which also has gotten wonderful reviews. Let me just ask you, if you don't mind, give us a quick capsule on Tales of Little Egypt, and then I'll tell you why I wanted a quick capsule.
Oh, sure. It's completely different. I mean, absolutely different. It's based on my really my knowledge of the 1890s when I was a historian. And it's also set in Southern Illinois in a very odd place called Little Egypt, because of the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. It's a river delta, and it's anchored by a city named Cairo, although down there they call it Cairo.
Like the syrup.
Like the syrup. And it's a series of interlocking sketches of individuals who constituted a small community in a very dynamic and changing world in the 1890s and early part of the 20th century, right up to the great pandemic of 1918. And I will say that one of the ironies of writing that book was I wrote it before the current pandemic occurred, and I did that because some of my distant relatives who lived in that area died of the 1918 plague, and I thought, well, that's a good place to end this series of sketches. So it's a completely different story, a different mode of writing. It's a series of interlocking short stories, odd characters, whereas I suppose there's a similarity in a detective who encounters a lot of odd characters.
Well, you see, there you go. You presuppose my question already. I put you through all that, and then you're putting me out of work here, James. No, but that was what I was going to ask you, because you drew, I think, it seems to me, okay, you drew more heavily on your experience as a respected historian for Tales of Little Egypt, whereas Murder of the Olympiad, I know can be very, obviously it's you've got all of the right verisimilitude, you've got the correct Puerto Vallarta stuff, but it's probably leans less heavily on history. So my question then, I'll kind of change it a little bit, is what's more fun to write?
Oh my God. I loved writing this book. I really loved it, but I really liked writing the other one. I don't know, that's a hard question because really both books are about characters and people, odd people that you meet. any detective story is really, I mean, the best detective stories are always about the characters.
Yeah.
They're not about the crime particularly. I mean, that's incidental. It's about the characters you meet along the way. And I tried to make this a series of odd characters. Some of them are expats, some are Mexicans, some are American visitors. It's all over the place in that sense. And I also liked writing about the bureaucracy that Amanda Pennyworth has to deal with. Ooh. The American ambassador, the tough strutting cops in Mexico who could care less about solving any crime, just put it under the rug. The parents of the boy who's murdered, who and I have to say, they're really my favorite characters. They're the nastiest people I think I've ever met. They hate each other. And they blame each other for the boy's death. So it was really a lot of fun to explore these characters.
Yeah, I understand that completely. I think it's just a blast for a writer, because when you create, particularly in the mystery, thriller, and suspense genres, where you can just blue sky this thing, create your own world, and let's face it, we all enjoy looking. Well, maybe we don't all. I do. I think you do too. I enjoy kind of lifting up the rock and looking at the seedier side of life. And I mean, you're not going to get as much intrigue at the church social. Although I've been to a few church socials where there's some intrigue, but you're going to find a lot more in the mean streets. Yeah. So I wonder, do you? And I think you already answered this, but I'll reframe it a little bit. Is Amanda kind of doing that? She's doing that amateur sleuth thing. She does. She's incredibly intelligent and connected and well-versed, but she's not a detective by training. Is she stumbling into a mystery and solving it? Is that what we're finding here? Is she one of those people who's like, Murder, She Wrote? She just attracts murder and mayhem wherever she goes. Tell us a little bit about Amanda, besides what you've already said about what she does, but tell us about her as a person. How old is she? Does she have?
She's about 35, going on. Well, she's going on middle age. She has a boyfriend among the locals, but the problem with being in the Foreign Service is that you get an assignment for 3 years and then they move you. Yeah. So it's really difficult to have a relationship, either a relationship back home or a relationship in the posting. And so she realizes that she's caught in a kind of never-ending merry-go-round of new people and new places and new situations. She has this boyfriend who was more of a character in the first novel, but the police chief in Puerto Vallarta, in revenge, he really dislikes Amanda because she's always interfering, and so he makes sure that her boyfriend is posted to Oaxaca. And he's out of the picture.
Nice.
So she's all by herself, and she's lonely, and I think that makes her more attuned to investigating other people's lives. It makes her more curious.
Right.
She's not so concerned with herself and a relationship, but she's always curious about people. And I think she likes people, but she does stumble on things. I mean, she's not a great detective. She's not Miss Marple, who has it all figured out from the first day. It's not like that at all.
Yeah, thank goodness. Well, see, now you've opened up a little bit of a question here then. Okay, she's at her posting for 3 years. Now, this puts you in a bit of a quandary, depending on how realistic you want this to be. Do you see her sticking around in Puerto Vallarta forever as far as the series goes, if you continue to write, or do you see her moving on to another city?
Well, I have finished another novel, which has been accepted, and in this, just to give you a small taste of this,
Yeah.
This novel takes place in Puerto Vallarta, and then it moves to Kenosha, Wisconsin. I know it's very odd, but it's about a group of tourists who come to Mexico from Kenosha, and one of them is murdered, and she eventually goes back to Chicago, which is where she comes from, and Kenosha is basically a suburb of Chicago, and so half the mystery takes place there. I think I'll write one more, and I may kill off her boyfriend. I'm thinking that maybe he'll get murdered.
And then she's got to solve that and maybe move on, because
Yes.
It's very painful to do that. I love that. I just finished the 8th and final book in my series, and it was so rewarding. I left it all in the field, is what I tell people. And I finally got a really nice Kirkus review and Midwest book review. So I'm very excited about it. But so I wanted to ask you that, though. What do you think about that? What do you think your fans will say if they hear this here on Mysterious Goings On, that you're saying there's maybe going to be one more book and then you're done? I mean, or two. How do you think they're going to feel?
More.
Two, yeah.
I don't know. I think that's a lot to read, 4 books.
Hey, try 8.
If everybody bought all 4 books, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. No, I hear you. If
I don't know. I haven't thought that yet.
But do you hear from people who read your books?
I do occasionally, yes.
Yeah.
The reviews of this one have been really really terrific.
Yeah.
And I think maybe when you're writing in a series, you get better at it. At least I hope so. I'm not sure about the third one, but now my expectations are, oh my goodness, this had better be better than this one.
Well, let me ask you, let's step outside of the actual book for a minute and talk about the writing aspect of that. And I'm kind of curious about this too, as somebody I am now, for the first time in 15 years, really looking at the blank page, in the sense that I cannot go to the comforts of the world I created for my series. It's done. If I want to write something new, I have to start all over. Now, I'm excited about it, James, but I also have some trepidation. Curious how you feel about that once you move on from Amanda Pennyworth.
Well, I'm in the middle of a book right now, and I'll tell you, it's based on a family story, vaguely. It's based on the life of my father, who was a lawyer in Chicago, and I keep going back to Chicago. It's a city I really love. I grew up near there. It's a fantastic city. It's full it's both a dynamic, wonderful modern city and a crude, industrial, primitive kind of place. And I love that contradiction. Anyway, this is a novel that I started because I had a character and I had a situation, and I think I have an ending, but I really haven't figured out how to get there. And so what I almost always do is to create a character and let the character, when I become that character, think a lot about that character. I dream about that character. I write notes to myself as I'm going to sleep about that character. And somehow the novel begins to take shape around that character. And that's really the way I write. But this one, I haven't figured it out yet, and I'm more than halfway done. I don't know what's going to happen.
So I think we're similar. I'm more of a seat of your pants, a pantser rather than a plotter. I'm kind of like you. I often will see the end, but boy, getting there, Who knows, right? I let the characters take me there. It's such a fun ride, usually.
Yes. And there are always surprises. I surprise myself.
I was going to ask you that. Have you ever just kind of pulled back from the keyboard and said, "Whoa, where did that come from?"
Yes, I'll tell you. I wrote a story in Tales of Little Egypt about a Jewish jeweler in a little town, and he encounters a lot of anti-Semitism, and just came out of nowhere. But he gets really upset about being an outcast and about hearing these awful things that people say. There's a lot of Midwestern language that talks about don't let him Jew you down, which has to do with bargaining,
right,
and things of that sort. I mean, it's horrible, and he confronts that, and he gets a client who comes in who never buys anything. She's an elegant, kind of upper class woman in this town, and she's a pretty nasty character. She comes in and she looks at a diamond ring, and she starts bargaining with him, and he gets really upset, and so he actually gives it for nothing. He gives it away because he thinks, well, you are who you think I am. You are acting the way I would act. And so this is his revenge. And the whole town begins to come in, and they strip him of all his goods, and he ends up with nothing. And I thought, oh my God, where did that come from? Why in the world did I think of that? Why would I think that? And yet it seemed to me to be a really interesting story about how you might react to prejudice.
That's stunning. It's not at all how I thought that was going to end when you were telling me that the whole town came and just basically picked his tree clean of fruit because of that. That's on my shelf. I've got to get to your that book, and I love short stories anyway, so I've got to get to that Tales of Little Egypt. Well, let me ask you real quick in our moments we have left here, James. Where do you see I asked this of all my guests, where do you see the business going, particularly suspense, mystery? Do you think that the rise of the heroine is going to continue as a wave, or will we kind of slip back and see male heroes become more the thing? What do you think about that?
I think we live in an era where the rise of the female everything is important.
Yes.
I think a lot of things about current literature. I think I don't know this for a fact, but it strikes me that there are probably more female novelists these days than male novelists. There's certainly English departments in academics are pretty much female. They used to be very male oriented, but I think that's changed. So I think that the heroine is going to be around for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that one of the things that I don't see a lot of is the noir kind of story, the Raymond Chandler sort of, or Leonard Elmore. Two writers who are wonderful writers, but I don't see that kind of literature being produced today. I see much more intimate, emotional, character-driven sorts of things, whereas those are tough guys situations. You don't ever really know any of the Elmore Leonard characters. They just act. You know the situation, but you don't know the inside of the character. And I think we're at a point where we're more interested in exploring the inside of, and I think, frankly, I think that's part of the influence of women writers.
I agree with you 100%. It's interesting that I grew up on noir. I love it. In fact, I had to write a thesis on that in school, and it was it's what I grew up on, but what I write is nowhere near that. My character is a male, but he's a lot like Amanda in that he's an amateur, at a college campus, though. I'm sure you know nothing about that, how political that is, right? But as I look down the barrel of a new thing, the only thing I do take from that era that I would love to do, and I'm nowhere near a good enough writer to do it, but I'd love to find that same vibe between Nick and Nora Charles from the Thin Man series.
Well, I'm actually trying to do that with the current novel I'm writing, where I have a junior lawyer and a paralegal who've teamed up to solve a. It's not really a crime, but it's solve a situation. It's a will that is going to be contested. They work together to find a mysterious benefactor, somebody who's going to inherit. So, but the repartee is what I'm interested in.
Yeah, I love that. Anytime I don't feel well or I'm tired or grouchy, I have all the Thin Man movies. I put them on. I say this all the time. People don't believe me, but it's true. I'm obviously not of her generation, but my first crush was Myrna Loy. So there you go.
There you go.
Oh my goodness. Murder at the Olympiad is a murder mystery that embraces social, political, and psychological tensions between two nations, creating a multifaceted read that is enlightening and gripping on more than one level. That's what our friends of the Midwest Book Review said. Kirkus Review says it's a deftly plotted mystery. And the U.S. Review of Books, not to be outdone, says author Gilbert is a writer skilled at exploring internal angst and postulating potential suspects and motives. As in most good mysteries, readers are left to determine just how much of the information being conveyed is of significance or mere subterfuge. Gosh, I love a review with the word subterfuge. James Gilbert, how do we find you? Where are you online? We'll put links in the show notes, but please give us a word. Where can we find you and learn more about you?
I have a website, which is called James Gilbert Author, all one run together word .com. And if you want to see the book, and I think there are 7 or 8 reviews on Amazon.
Great.
You can find it there, or Barnes & Noble, or any platform like that. Or, I think you could order this book through a bookstore if you wanted to. If you can find one that's open.
Exactly. And of course, we always encourage you to go to your local independent bookstore.
Absolutely.
They don't have room on the shelf for every great book, but they do have the ability to order any book you want, and then that way they get a little piece of it, and you can keep bookstores alive. Sir, I'm going to give you the last word here.
Well, I just want to thank you for having such intelligent questions. It's unusual.
Can I quote? Well, you know what? You just recorded that. James, I know I have it's a funny comment because I get this, and I'm not bragging, but I get a nice comment like that usually after the show's over. And then I'm like, I wish I had the recorder on so people would believe me. I tell my wife, no, really, that author said I was really intelligent. She's like, I don't believe you. Dr. Gilbert, thank you so much. You are such a treat. Your work is wonderful. We'll put links to it in the show notes at mgopod.com. Sir, the door is always open to you. We can't wait to hear what's next with that third book.
Okay. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on Mysterious Goings On. Be sure to follow Mysterious Goings On wherever you get your podcast and never miss an episode. Don't forget, you can get the links to books and other things mentioned on the show at mgopod.com. Until next time, keep reading.